I try to preach on the creation story at least twice a year. And I think it's particularly well suited to this time of year because it's so cold and gray outside. I think it's particularly important for us to be reminded of this story about new life and creation and rebirth. It was also so well suited for this weekend as we celebrate baby dedication, to be reminded of the creation story. This creation story in Genesis is familiar to most people. In fact, it's so familiar that I think sometimes we don't even really listen to the words because we've heard it so many times before. But I think that if we're really careful and we go through this story and we listen very intently to what is being said, I think it has some very profound truths to teach us. It begins like this. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness God called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. I'm fascinated by the fact that the creation story starts with light. It starts with this image of light coming out of darkness. I think this idea of light shining in the darkness, or a light being lit in the darkness, is one that we see throughout Scripture. It's an ongoing image. And it reminds me particularly of the beginning of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, and all things came into being through him. And without him, not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light in all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. So the creation story in Genesis, it is a narrative story that was an early explanation of why we have light and dark and why we have day and night. It is that. But perhaps more importantly for us, it's also a symbolic story. And the light within the story of Genesis represents innate goodness. We see this throughout Scripture. Light is goodness. Light is the Spirit of God. So to me, I find this so interesting that before God created anything else, God created goodness. God created love. God created light. And so that means that love and light and goodness, this is the core of creation. This is the very foundation of everything. And I think that we're told this in the creation story because God stops after each thing is created and God says, "This is good. This is good." It's as if God is naming each part of creation, reminding each piece of creation that it is good. God is reminding us that our name, that what we are fundamentally, is good. Now, there is so much in this scripture story, and you all have heard it now a few times this morning. And for the sake of time, I'm going to skip to kind of the best part, for us anyway, for humankind. It's the creation of humankind. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our own image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. So God created humankind in God's own image. In the image of God they were created, male and female they were created. And God saw everything that God had made, and indeed it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the sixth day. I have always been intrigued by this idea of being made in God's image. I've always wondered what that means. What does it mean that humankind is made in God's image? Now, not to sound real scholarly, but Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was a famous theologian, he worked closely with Karl Barth. And in one of his books, Creation and the Fall, he says that the intrinsic quality or essence that God passes along to humankind is relationality. In other words, we are made in God's image in that we are made to be in relationships. God is always in relationship with the universe, with all of the cosmos, and with each of us. We all have a relationship with God, and God has a relationship with all of creation. And God also made us to be in relationship with each other and with God and with the universe, with all of the cosmos, that is how we are made in God's image. So if we put this together with the earlier part of the creation story, we get this idea. We are made to be good. Indeed, we are made out of the stuff of goodness, whatever that is. We're made out of the stuff of goodness. And we are made to live into that goodness by being in loving relationship with each other. We can get back to our intrinsic goodness. We can get back to our intrinsic wholeness by living in loving community with each other and by witnessing to the light that is within each person. And also by living in relationship with the divine. Another way to put this is that we were made to love and to be loved. We were made by God to love others and to be loved. And God blessed us, and God said, "You are good." Let's take this idea into our time of silent worship this morning. We are made good by God, and we live into this goodness by living in loving relationship with each other.